Couple minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you this.
It will be better if here because okay. Let me.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, Kirill, the mouse roll.
So Congress is turning down the music.
CEO of DINtv. Yes. Startup. That's his platform. Actually, okay. It's really good for grassroots activism. So you'll be broadcasting live on DINtv and Facebook Live.
You guys are going to the town hall, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good.
I was calling up late last night.
Yeah, I know you were
there for Mike Fox.
people to the town hall for us.
Mike, that's the problem. You should get some activists here now, and they're all apparently there's a Tim Canova event going on right now, and there's a Save the Everglades thing.
It's a Jill Stein
There's
thing.
a Jill Stein, the convention watch is going on.
It's a busy progressive day.
So a number of people are going to be like on the road, carrying the road up to get to the town hall. Definitely.
Cool.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, we are ready. We all go. No, it's fine. I will film you.
Oh, where's the microphone?
Microphone with Alan, and you just ask
Oh,
questions here. No, it's fine. Brian, you just ask questions.
Just ask questions?
Yes.
Okay, well, let me check the narrative. I'm with Alan Grayson. Welcome.
Yes.
Facebook. You have to get up there.
Yes.
Okay. Hello. Ryan Session. I'm with Congressman Alan Grayson. The man is basically a superstar along the lines of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. I mean, they have YouTube videos where they're challenging power or challenging the Republican Party, and their videos are still viral. Very well known among the progressive community. Basically, a fight for power. And what we've seen since the Democratic National Convention is literally a purge of the left. Reminds me of the end of the movie The Godfather, where you have conservatives appearing on all the rival families. That's going on right now. You have Nina Turner, for example, going out the DNC convention and going off track. This man is basically having a major attack on his campaign. Want to talk to him about it, and basically the media has been completely unfair as usual. The media has been completely unfair to you. Especially regarding the accusations of your ex-wife, Rita. I know both sides. I mean, I know I've been very good friends with women that have been in physically abusive relationships, but I also know people, for example, activist Joe Krebs. There is a man that when he was going through a rough divorce and there was money on the table, basically false allegations of abuse were put to him, recommended by the lawyer. It happened.
It's far worse than that. I mean, in this case, it was not only the case of my being abused and then she would call the police and try to make trouble against me, but of the children as well. I don't know if you're aware of this, but all three of my older children live with me exclusively. I have full custody of the children. And what happened is they ran away from home because she was abusing them and called the police 6 times after we separated. So that gives you the kind of mentality that we're talking about here. She abused them and then called the police and tried to get them in trouble.
Now, I read that your daughter, Sky Grayson, basically said that your mother has, that her mother has, and she says all her allegations are completely false.
That's right. I mean, my daughter's an adult. She's allowed to speak for herself at this point. And she's done that twice. First, when this trash was first raised against me 2.5 years ago, the court dismissed everything immediately because there was a videotape that actually showed my ex hitting me twice in the face and my backing away. And now when they try to regurgitate it for the benefit of this campaign, my daughter stepped forward again and explained exactly what's right and what's wrong. She said that she hit me, I didn't hit her, she hit all of us, including my 80-year-old mother.
That's a very important video, actually. I mean, totally the opposite of, say, for example, remember a year ago, there was that famous was it NFL football player, Ray Rice, punching his wife in the elevator. This is
research by 500%. Patrick Murphy said on national TV that he's looking to cut Social Security and Medicare across the board. This is somebody who literally has no way to win except to smear me, and that's exactly what he's done from day one of this campaign. Whether it's this or anything else, it's just a relentless smear campaign by Patrick Murphy, who's running the dirtiest campaign in the history of Florida.
Oh yeah, no, don't worry, Alan. I do want to hit the issue. I mean, I myself have experienced, I mean, the campaign against us was so intense. I mean, I myself have been accused of being ideologically blinded and thus supporting a flawed candidate. And that's nonsense. You know, that's pure nonsense. I know it is. And we see what the Democratic establishment is. And as you said, actually, your marriage was annulled because your wife lied. So that shows something.
Over and over and over again.
So it's just amazing. Right. But Senator Schumer, basically fresh from telling Bernie Sanders that you have to give Hillary a shining endorsement, otherwise you lose all 10 committee seats, basically then turned around and started attacking you, screaming you have to drop out of your race because of this and so forth.
Well, that's the game that they play. The reason for that is very simple. We're winning. You know, our latest poll shows that we're winning, and we're winning beyond the margin of error. So as we get closer and closer to decision day, they get more and more and more desperate. And they think that the way to deal with that is just to elevate the smears higher and higher. And we'll see if that works or not. I mean, look, you know, I'll tell you, in my district where people on the average make $12 an hour, they're looking for somebody who's going to do something good for them. Trust fund child Patrick Murphy, who hangs out on his 97-foot-long yacht that sleeps 8 and costs $100,000 just to fill the tank, he's not going to be doing much good for them. But they know that I will, because that's exactly the way I've been. I've been a champion for justice, equality, and peace the entire time that I've been in Congress, and even before then.
Patrick Murphy, basically silver spoon in the mouth.
Yeah, some part of the anatomy, yeah. Yes, I mean, he gave $2,300 to Mitt Romney, who's a lifelong Republican, until he decided to run for Congress, and then he gets elected as a Democrat, and according to Salon magazine, tries to turn back. He said to Boehner, according to Salon, he'd like to be a Republican again, and Boehner said, we're not interested. Thank you very much.
Do you think he'll turn on the TPP? He went against the fast track, but I believe that he voted against fast track simply to get labor to endorse him for this election.
He is a callow tool. He will do whatever he is told to do. He's a puppet. That's what Patrick Murphy is. He's a puppet.
Owned by Wall Street, his main donor.
Yes,
like
he sells the law. He cuts the law into little pieces and he sells it to the highest bidder. That's Patrick Murphy for you. There's a reason why Patrick has raised more money from Wall Street than any other Democrat, even though he's not the ranking member of any committee on banking, right, not the ranking member of any subcommittee on banking, and somehow or other ends up with more cash in his pocket than any other Democrat. That's because his voting card is for sale to the highest bidder.
What do you think of the behavior of the establishment this election cycle? It has been pretty bad.
It's exactly the way you describe it. It's a purge. What we're seeing is that the Democrats, who are pigs at the trough, the ones who think about only the $10,000 PAC checks and nothing else, and they think about how they can buy the favor of the millionaires and the billionaires and the multinational corporations and the lobbyists, the special interests, they're the ones who are now in control of the party machinery, and they're using that control in order to purge everybody else. They took $3 million of party money, and they use it to interfere in the Pennsylvania primary and elevate one candidate above the other. And now they're doing the same thing in the Florida primary. Don't they think voters notice this? Don't they think that donors notice this? That rather than taking the money that they're getting as Democratic leaders, they're actually taking that money and using it to feed one Democrat running against another Democrat just because I happen to be a progressive? I mean, I'll tell you, I know some large donors, and they're so fed up, so completely fed up with the how shall I put this, the crooked accountants who are running the Democratic Party at this point, that before long you're going to see a major donor strike.
Really?
Yeah,
so
that's where they are at this point.
Have sort of a split, and you have a break in the donor class that some are more progressive and are trying to.
Yes, I mean, some large donors are very progressive. The classic example of this, of course, is George Soros.
Okay.
You know, do you think that donors like that are progressive in their heart like to see the fact that the party is using every tool at its disposal to defeat progressives all across the country? Not just me, but Donna Edwards and so many others all across the country.
I've noticed that about George Soros. And if you go back you can go for a debate between George Soros and Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize winning economist. And you'll see George Soros surprisingly was to the left of Paul Krugman and was more critical of the current capitalism. That's what being totally by surprise.
Well, look, I mean, look, there's a fundamental flaw that is just increasing over time, and it's obvious to us all. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. If the trend continues, soon one person will own everything. And where does that leave us? And what it's doing is, over time, it's substantially weakening not just our economy, but the world economy. Wealth is, the existence of wealth means money that is unspent. Okay, a wealthy person is someone who gets more money than he spends. Okay, that takes money out of circulation. And that's true whether you're talking about a wealthy billionaire or it's true whether you're talking about a multinational corporation. The Fortune 500 companies, the 500 largest companies in America, have over $1 trillion in cash on their balance sheets that's just sitting there. It's not being invested. It's not creating jobs. It's not creating demand. And what it's doing is draining the economy worse and worse over time. So we end up with federal deficits as fiscal policy. We end up with enormous expansions of the monetary base, quantitative easing as monetary policy. These are all basically patches. These are Band-Aids on the underlying problem, which is that money is being accumulated and goes unspent. So over time, the economy gets weaker and weaker and weaker. Now, some people who benefit from that, like Patrick Murphy's father, you can be sure that they're not going to do anything to correct that problem. But Soros, being a person who recognizes how the modern economies work, he does recognize that problem. And I imagine Paul Krugman does as well. But the fact is that if your eyes are open, you realize that we're heading for a future with nothing but debt slavery and cheap labor in America and most of the industrial countries around the world.
Quantitative easing in particular is something that upset both the left and the right. Seen as a giveaway strictly to the rich. But the idea that you couldn't have done sort of a debt jubilee, quantitative easing money to the public rather than to the banks, because that would bring up the notion of moral hazard, doesn't make any sense to me.
Listen, let me just explain it in plain terms, okay, what quantitative easing really means. The Federal Reserve creates cash out of thin air. They used to call it a printing press, but now it's just basically some numbers on a screen, okay? They create cash out of thin air. They use that exclusively to buy assets. Who owns those assets? The rich own those assets, of course. Who owns assets generally? It's the rich. The top 1% owns half of all the assets in America. So they use that money that they created out of thin air to buy assets. The law of supply and demand tells you what happens next. The value of those assets go up. So the Fed is debasing the money that's in your pocket, in your wallet, those bills that you have in there, plus whatever's in your savings account, for the benefit of driving up asset prices, and therefore indirectly trying to spread with demand in the least effective way possible. That's what quantitative easing actually is. It's creating money, cheapening the existing money in your pocket for the benefit of driving up asset values that are owned primarily by the rich.
Well, they could have done a quantitative easing to the public. The government could have told the public, use it to pay down your debt. That's basically essentially the same as the asset transfer.
Yes, but instead, what my audit the Fed bill demonstrated, I arranged for the first audit of the Fed in the first century of its existence, the first independent audit. What we found was $23 trillion in bailout money, and 5 of the 10 largest recipients were foreign banks. Not U.S. banks, not U.S. individuals like you're suggesting, not even U.S. corporations, but foreign banks. 5 out of the top 10 recipients. Some of them received close to $1 trillion.
Ben Bernanke even suggested a quantitative easing to the public. Oddly enough, to Japan. Then he turned around to our own economy.
Oh, I think that he is suggesting something even more radical than that. But he's suggesting that they adopt negative interest rates on extremely long-term bonds, which essentially means that you never pay it back. I mean, right now the horizon for debt is generally 10 to 30 years, and right now we're seeing negative interest rates because the monetary base is being cheapened and destroyed through quantitative easing all around the world. So we're seeing more and more negative interest rates. If you have negative interest rates on a 50-year bond or a 100-year bond or a 200-year bond, what that really means is the money will never be paid back.
The debt will never be paid back.
That's right.
Never was meant to be paid back.
And that's what he's been discussing with Japan.
you feel that we're stuck in a state of stagflation now?
No, it's not stagflation. I mean, it's not stagflation in the sense that we had in the 80s, the late 70s, in the sense that there's large increases in the prices of goods and services that people are buying. But what's happened is we're stuck in a debt trap that is created and perpetuated and worsened by unequal distribution of wealth and an unequal distribution of income. It gets worse and worse and worse. I mean, think about it this way. Let's say hypothetically we woke up one day and one person did own everything in the world. Right? Then he got that $50 trillion of world national product, if you will, the GNP for the world, the gross world product, the GWP, $50 trillion. And he decided that he'd buy 3 more airplanes, he'd buy 2 more mansions, maybe he'd spend something like $100 million, which is pretty much all you can humanly spend if you're one individual in any given year. That means that the following year, the world GNP drops from $50 trillion down to 100 million, whatever he spends, because no one else has any money to spend. The more unequal the distribution of wealth and income is, the more difficult it is to sustain the aggregate demand that people need in order to be able to sell their goods and services to each other.
Well, there is no aggregate, and aggregate demand is drying up right now.
All over the world.
They don't have the money.
All over the world. That is correct. I mean, the modern industrial economy creates such vast, unequal distributions of wealth and income, which are perpetuated by the government and worsened by the government. That the net result of that is that everyone is heading toward pauperism all around the world.
And we see the reactions among the people here, following Bernie or Trump, the reactionary right, and that led to reactionary right movements throughout Europe too. And both reactionary right and left pushing for leaving Europe, Brexit. What's your opinion of Brexit?
You know, I have mixed feelings about it. I think, my view is somewhat different from most people's points of view. It doesn't, what brought about Brexit was the fact that they opened the borders to anybody who wanted to come in from anywhere in the European Union, and this resulted in a backlash. Our nation has borders. There are laws to govern who can come into the country and who can't. In the case of Britain, they basically relinquished that, and that led to a backlash. That's sort of understandable. Most countries all around the world are populated by people who want to have some kind of degree of control over who comes into the country and who doesn't.
That's part of it. I think the bigger role was the austerity policy pushed by the European Union.
Yes, that's a fair observation, yes.
The fact that the European Union really lacks any sense of democracy. There is no democracy. I mean, it's Yanis Varoufakis, who was for staying in, felt that there was perhaps some way to reform the European Union internally, and even he admitted that the European Parliament, people say it has a democracy deficit, but he says, saying that the European Parliament has a democracy deficit is sort of like saying there's an oxygen deficit on the moon. There isn't any. So
there's a fundamental problem, and we're going to have to wrap this up because we have to go to our next appointment. The fundamental problem is that the European Union, like the World Bank, has become part of the machinery of austerity that destroys people's lives and even their hopes, the hope for a better world. And without the European Union, we never would have seen 25% unemployment in Greece, 25% unemployment in Spain, something very much approaching that in Portugal, huge economic dislocations in Ireland and in Italy, and the imbalances that you see where essentially the entire continent is going heavily into debt to Germany and to Switzerland, and again, becoming a whole continent of debt slavery and cheap labor. That is the way that it's working in practice, whatever the original concept may have been. Everybody agrees that there shouldn't be any more war in Europe. Everybody agrees about that. But to say that you go from that to create a device to impoverish tens or even hundreds of millions of people for the benefit of a select few, that's a different story. And I'm sorry, but we need to go.
We need to go. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Alan Grayson.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. That's outstanding.
Thank you.
It's right up our alley. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I'll be,
Thank you.
Let's be in touch. Absolutely. Thank you. Alan.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job.
I was just thinking.
I say.
Yeah, I'm just gonna.
This is the main. This is a.
Okay, guys, sit down.
It's a central valley.
So, how did it go?